Ryan and Eric, who would you say some of your favorite guests are that we've had on the podcast?
Ryan, I would say it was your dad, a Vietnam veteran that had intense action stories as well as touching and meaningful, content about, his life and yours.
That's true. I do have to say my dad, he has to be my favorite, but a close second would probably be COVID virologist.
Oh, that was amazing. I'd say it's a toss-up between Jason Weems, who is a comedian who died on stage and was resurrected to be on our podcast and raise his family and other things, other responsibilities. And we also had a Marine One, or like presidential helicopter pilot, on the show, and that was crazy.
That's a good one. That's hard to beat. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, tune into the Baggage Podcast, where four friends, a prosecutor, a doctor, a comedian, and a journalist, interview ordinary people about their extraordinary experiences. Search for Baggage wherever you get your podcast.
On today's edition of Stories from Real Life with Melvin E. Edwards. It's the milestone 100th episode, and we asked Alex Sanfilippo to be the special guest.
So for me, the reason I'm so passionate about that and excited to see 100,000 plus interviews getting released is because I have to believe each of those is impacting somebody's life, and it's ultimately making the world a better place. And I'm a firm believer in that. And yes, as I mentioned multiple times now, I'm a follower of Jesus. It doesn't need to be like quote unquote Christian content to impact somebody's life, to help them. At the end of the day, people are searching maybe for an answer to one question, and your voice, your guest's voice, might be the only voice that finally makes that thing click for somebody. To me, man, there's just nothing more powerful than that.
Let's join today's conversation with Alex Sanfilippo and the 100th episode of Stories from Real Life.
You are listening to Stories from Real Life, a podcast by engaging storytellers for engaged story listeners. Here's your host, author and journalist, Melvin E. Edwards.
Hello again, and welcome to today's episode of Stories from Real Life. I'm your host, Melvin E. Edwards. Thanks for joining me for today's show, which happens to be my 100th episode. Our guest is Alex Sanfilippo, the founder of PodMatch and host of PodMatch Podcasting Made Simple. Hello, Alex, and welcome to the podcast.
Melvin, congratulations on 100 episodes, and thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here. That 100 episode mark is... the chances of a podcaster making that far, I'm a data guy and a full-time podcaster. I know there's a less than a 10% chance of making it to 100 episodes for podcasters. So congratulations again, and I'm honored to be here. Love your show as a listener and just really excited.
Thanks a lot, Alex. So how are things going on near the Florida-Georgia line there in Jacksonville?
Yeah, great. It's actually really, it's funny. Today I was talking to my business partner. So it's me, my wife, and then one other partner, and he lives in Kentucky. And they've been talking about how it's been snowing, freezing, cold. And today we got on the call and I was like, I hear like wind. And he's like, yeah, I got my window open. I'm like, whew, man, what are you doing? He's like, man, it's 70 degrees out today. And I looked at our temperature. I'm like, it's 50 degrees here. I'm like, just when you think you got this thing figured out. And he's like, wow, this is the only day this is going to happen. But yeah, here in Jacksonville, Florida, my wife, Alicia, and I, and business partner, we live very close to the ocean, and we love being out at the water. We love riding our bikes out there. And so we're outdoor people. And so it's just a beautiful place to live. Thoroughly enjoying it here.
I like Jacksonville too. You and I have exchanged some emails, and I told you my daughter went to Jacksonville University. And so I spent a little bit of time there, and I really enjoyed Jacksonville.
Yeah, it's a good spot. I played there. I play soccer, just now it's more rec, but I did play against JU's soccer team, and that might have been the last game I ever wanted to play in. After that, they were real fast, really good.
Yeah, for a Division I school, they're really small, but they have some great athletes who go to school.
For sure. Oh, yeah. It's an incredible school. They've done a very good job with that.
Yeah, my daughter loved it there. All right, so let's get on the topic today. So before we go any further, I want to answer the question that you might be thinking. Why did I invite you as my 100th guest? So of my 17 episodes so far this year, 14 of those guests have come directly from PodMatch. So your platform has helped me find such interesting and fun guests that I wanted to have you here so I could thank you personally. That's why you're here.
That's incredible. Thank you for that's amazing to hear. Thank you. That just warms my heart, makes my day. I'm really thankful to hear that. And I mentioned it a few minutes ago, but as a listener to your podcast, I guess I didn't know that those people were coming from PodMatch, but you've had some incredible interviews. So, I mean, kudos to you for making it happen and for finding out how to pick the right guests and stuff, right? But man, I am honored to be here and so thankful to hear that. That seriously makes my day.
That's awesome. Yeah, for me, I love hearing people's stories. I'm a storyteller myself, and I love hearing other people's stories. And my thinking is, if it's interesting to me, I can probably make it interesting to you. But if it's not interesting to me, I probably can't make it interesting to you. So if it's somebody whose story I want to hear, I want you to hear it too. It's like share it. So it's just really a fun time. I really love doing this. So you and I met each other. Sorry about that. You and I met each other after we reached out. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Now you're making my day. You reached out to me in December to invite me to join the PodMatch network. And after a couple of email exchanges, I was inspired to write down my mission for this show. And this is what I came up with. So this may be a little bit longer than most mission statements. So the Stories from Real Life podcast will attract high quality guests. And those conversations with the host are intended to provoke thought, evoke laughter, and encourage reevaluation. Each episode will be thoroughly researched and produced with a professional sound quality comparable to other top podcasts, whether they are independent or corporate. So that's what I've come up with so far.
I love the parts thought and laughter, because I think that those things really, like, it's just brilliant that you mentioned that. I know that you're a storyteller, like you get this, but there's got to be something that's thought provoking and encourage laughter. And the best way I can describe this is if anyone listens to like any or watches any modern day comedians, they're starting to actually put like a takeaway in what they share. Yeah, they make you laugh for sure, but you're also like, I learned something from this, right? They're like kind of catching on. Like there's got to be some story that has something that's thought provoking for you and encourages laughter. And I love that you put that in that mission statement. I think it wasn't too long. I think it's well said.
I appreciate that. It seemed like it was probably twice as long as it should have been, but I'm glad you liked it. So I'm going to put you on the spot here, if you don't mind. Which podcast do you consider the best? And the reason I'm asking you that is because I want my podcast to compare with that, whatever it is. Whatever one you consider the best, that's the one I'll listen to, and then I'll take something away from that to add to my show.
I'll go with the show that immediately came to mind, but this is like, Melvin, this is like the toughest question for me to answer because I feel like I built such great relationships with so many hosts that I become a little bit biased. So I'm going to actually, and this is against what I usually do, but I'm going to go to one of the top podcasts because I actually do know the individual, but Jordan Harbinger, the Jordan Harbinger show. I think he does a really good job just capturing interesting topics and conversations. He really pulls something out that I think a lot of people don't. And I think what makes it really good, and I think you probably understand this as well, is that he's learned to make his episodes follow a narrative. So if at minute 30, someone says something that would be better to be in the beginning, they'll edit it and move that closer to the beginning so that it follows a story arc all the way through. That's kind of where I learned how to do that, was by listening to Jordan Harbinger's show. I think he's done a really good job modeling it. Again, like you can follow the whole thing through and you don't want to stop because you don't feel like it's just random questions. Like you feel like it follows something. So, again, not my favorite question to answer because I'm like, man, I love so many shows, but that's the one that immediately came to mind. So the Jordan Harbinger show is the one I'll mention.
Okay, I hadn't heard of that, so I'll have to go and check it out and listen to it and try to take whatever he does and incorporate it into my show.
Yeah.
So I've heard you talk a couple times during virtual seminars that PodMatch puts on, and I get the impression that you consider your work now to be as much of a ministry as a business. Is that accurate?
It is. Yeah. No one's actually ever mentioned that before. So thank you for like a gift to even hear somebody else say that. But I do. Like for me, it really is an act of service. It's an act of love. And yes, I'm an entrepreneur. It's a business. It's a for-profit business. But I've weirdly enough, I've never been, at least in my adult life, been very motivated by the money side of things. I'm really big on impact and on purpose. And so for like me personally, everything's driven by my faith. I happen to be a follower of Jesus, and I never push that on anyone on the platform or anything like that. That's just basically Alex's foundation that I believe we've done a good job of making sure that's known on the platform, that we're here to love and to serve people really well. So for me, yes, absolutely. It's more of a ministry than anything else.
And I really appreciate that because that's also my foundation. And I don't make that the basis for my show, but it's woven within the context of the stories, just in the way I want to treat people and the way I want to be treated myself. So yeah, I appreciate that you do that.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. For some reason, it actually reminds me of a past episode of your show. It was, I believe it was titled The Challenge of Launching Young Adults Today. something along those lines. It was episode 99, aired on March 18th, 2025. Whether you're a young adult, have kids, don't have kids, I encourage everyone to go listen to that episode because it was really good. I don't have kids, but it was really good. Dr. Jack was your guest, and he said something that really stood out to me. He said, is my action and decisions based in love or something negative? And it is aligned with my principles. And for me, when I think of my business, I want to make sure that it's aligned, like Dr. Jack said, that it's aligned with based in love, not in something negative or something self-serving, because I also consider that negative, and is aligned with my principles. And to me, everything we do in business, I say we, it's me, my wife, and we have one other business partner. We're very aligned with the fact of we're here to love and to serve people. And I just really, again, appreciate the fact that you noticed that and called it out today. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. So before you got into podcasting, you were a business prodigy and you were involved in everything from used golf balls to real estate. How much money were you making as an 18-year-old real estate investor before the 2008 crash?
Yeah. The golf ball thing, by the way, was when I was 10 to 12 years old. That was my introduction to entrepreneurship. Wasn't making much, also wasn't paying taxes. Sorry, Uncle Sam. But later on, I got into the real estate space. And it was, let's see, this was just before the real estate crash. I have to imagine it was probably just over, it's probably about 120,000 a year, maybe, is what I was kind of bringing in, a lot of that being passive and stuff like that. I think it was about that number, which for me, 18, 19, 20-year-old kid, like that was like I could have never imagined. And obviously with inflation, the numbers, I don't know what that would be in today's world, but this is going back to 2004, 5, and 6. And yeah, that's what I was making at that point. Unlike now, I was very driven by the number, very driven by that. And that's what I really wrapped my identity up at that point in my life.
So what happened next after 2008?
Yeah, so I was kind of sailing and coasting in this. And as I just mentioned, I kind of had my identity wrapped up in basically the money, the stature, the status, like these type of things. And it was very much so misaligned. It's the wrong thing to be focused on because I found myself always feeling like I never had enough. That's right. You get a little bit more to what was formerly known as enough. And now it's like, no, this still isn't enough. And I just know that I was just never going to make it. Right. I don't think I knew that at that point, but thankfully, we had this recession. We had this market correction happen. And I wasn't one of the people smart enough to see that this was coming. So I was all eggs in the basket of real estate. I had a tech startup that was in the real estate space. And I also had doing investments, buy and hold strategy. And so I went from doing really well one day to waking up the next day to having a company that could no longer be run. And I actually had a partner in that. I ended up there was no even money exchange. I said, hey, I can't do this. This is just you now. And you can see if anyone wants to stay working with you. And on the investment side, I actually ended up moving into an investment property that I never had any intent on moving into. But it was the only way I wouldn't lose the property was that I had to move into it. And I was over leveraged, all the bad things. It's like, hey, you're in the worst spot in 2008 if this happens. And there I was in that space. And so, yeah, I consider this to be the most fortunate time of my life, though, because it forced me to hit rock bottom. And at that point, I was in a bad relationship, mostly financially driven. The friends, air quotes, I had in my life there were people that were kind of following the money, right? Maybe they wanted to be like that as well, or they were like that. And so I found myself broken and alone. Like my identity was wrapped up in how good I was doing financially. And now I had nothing. And I didn't have any people to lean on. Any real friendships I had, I kind of didn't prioritize. So now it felt weird going back to them being like, hey, I haven't talked to you in years. How are you? Right? I'm struggling. Can you help me? And I can say that to this day, that was the lowest point in my life. That was absolute rock bottom. But I think that when it comes to our identity and really who we are at our core, sometimes it takes that for us to wake up and to reconsider our direction in life. And so for me, that was it. And to like kind of put salt in the wound that I had, I ended up getting a job in the aerospace industry, which ended up becoming a career. But when I said got a job there, my title, I believe, was receiving clerk, which basically meant Alex breaks down boxes and takes out people's trash. And listen, from where I was to that, it was humbling. And it, again, much, much needed. And so that's what led me to to really discovering myself. And as I shared just a moment ago, like our values within PodMatch, treating it more like a ministry, not being motivated by the money, that all happened because of this rock bottom experience. And Melvin, if it's helpful, I can share the actual, like, the moment where this thing shifted for me, if that's a good direction for us to go in.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Yeah. So I remember every day checking my mail after work, and I'm kind of like a type A guy. I don't leave stuff sitting around. So there's not stacks of bills. I handle them. Like, as soon as I get them, I open it, I handle it. And I remember this day I was expecting more bills to come through. There probably were bills, but one thing that showed up was a flyer to a young adults church ministry. And I grew up, I'd say religious, not really a person of faith, but more religious. And but I had really steered away from that in my teen years and as I got more financially driven. But I remember looking at this card and feeling like I was supposed to go to this thing. And I looked at the address, and I'm like, this is like, has to be right across the street from where I'm living right now. Like, it has to just be right there. And so I put it in the corner of my counter, which, again, unlike me. And I was like, I'll look at this later. Melvin, I let that sit there for 3 weeks, which, again, not like me. Every day it kind of haunted me a little bit. And finally I was just like, I got to throw this thing away. Why am I holding on to this? And I just couldn't. And finally I was like, you know what? I'm going to go so I can throw this away. Like, a little crazy in the mind, right? But I'm like, I'm just going to go. I remember getting my car, driving there. It happened to be the night this was going to be happening. And I remember as soon as I got in the parking lot, man, like, I guess when you walk into anything new, maybe you feel this way. But I was like, man, I don't have any friends. These people are going to see them a fraud, that I made really bad investment decisions, that I'm alone, like I'm going to get judged here just like everywhere else. Like I already know what's going to happen. Like, why am I putting myself through this? And all these thoughts and emotions run through my head. And I kind of held to this point of courage means being afraid than doing what you have to do anyway. And for some reason I was like, you know what? I'm afraid and I don't want to do this, but I know that I'm supposed to. I'm just going to walk in here and do this. And man, what happened next is hard for me to describe. I remember walking in, and I guess the bonus is that people were very kind and didn't seem to care about my financial status. And that was a great thing, right? I had never really experienced people who just love for the sake of loving people because I'm another human being. So that was a bit of a bonus, but I was impacted by God, and I don't know how to describe it other than I walked in and I felt this sense of peace and calm that I hadn't felt since I was a young boy. I just felt this sense of peace. You mentioned the golf ball thing earlier. That's the first time stress entered my life. 10 years old, selling golf balls, thinking we don't have enough inventory. Weird thought for 10-year-old, right? But that's when this idea of stress and pressure and this reshaping of my identity started. And for the first time in what must have been 10 years, I felt this sense of, man, there's something here, right? And so I just believe that God just met me where I was. And for the first time, I can't describe it, but I felt loved and accepted. Not because of anything I've done, but just because of being here, I suppose. Again, hard for me to describe, but I'll tell you what, like at that moment, I broke down in tears, and I was like, man, like God, like if you're real, if this is something, like I'm going to dive into this, but this is where I want my identity to be. That whole situation, man, that was my rock bottom. That was the worst time of my life, but it also became this new foundation I was able to build upon. And to this day, I look at that whole experience, that whole moment, that whole situation as the pillar for all success in my life. And I don't just mean financial success. I more so mean emotional success, relational success, and really just building a thriving relationship with God. And man, my life is night and day better. And it took me forever. I say forever. It took me many years to ever get back to a financial status that I previously had and to get out of the debt that I got myself in. But that stuff never really bothered me. And I didn't even feel the need to celebrate when I made more than that again, because it wasn't the motive anymore. And so that's kind of the story of where I came from. And a lot of it is, I just can't describe it, but man, I felt like Jesus just met me. And to this day, am grateful for that.
That's really incredible. I appreciate you sharing that. And I believe you also met your wife during that experience at that church. Is that correct?
I did. Thankfully, that was years later after I kind of got some of my stuff together. But yeah, sure enough, I remember we were both driving the same kind of car, and it wasn't a common car, but I was like, I saw it one day and I was like, someone told me a cute girl drives the other one of these. I'm like, I'm just going to park next to her and see if she talks to me when I walk in the door. Funny enough, that strategy worked. I walked in the door and she started talking to me.
That was your first PodMatch.
There you go. Right. That's funny. It was interesting. I walked in the door, and I'm typically I'm pretty good at just talking with people. I didn't think much of it, but it was one of those moments where it was like, I know it sounds cheesy, but it was totally love at first sight. Like I saw her and just froze. And she's like, "Hi, nice car." And I was like, "Thank you, nice car to you too," type of thing. And the first 3 times I saw her, she said all I would talk about is the car because it's all I could like. And she was fine. Like, you need to talk to me about something other than cars. I was like, okay, I'll try. But yeah,
it's pretty awesome that she even gave you that chance, a second chance to make the first impression.
Right, for real.
All right, so I listened to an episode with you as a guest yesterday, and something really piqued my interest, and I'd like for you to touch on that. How PodMatch started with a whiteboard in your home. Tell me about how that evolved.
Yeah, so I got the initial idea for PodMatch, which I didn't know was PodMatch, but I got it while I was at PodFest Orlando, which is a big podcasting conference in Orlando, Florida. I was just talking to podcasters, and they all kind of described a very similar problem they're having, connecting with guests and streamlining that process. So I was like, okay, there's something there. Melvin, I wasn't smart enough to know what that meant. So I just kind of came home with this in my head, and I'll never forget it. This is another one of those situations where I felt like God really intervened, but I was actually working out outside because at this point, COVID had kind of begun and everyone was at home. So I was like working out on my outside, my backyard. And I just was like, I wasn't even thinking about it, but for some reason, I just felt like I was supposed to go in to the whiteboard and just write down what I believe everyone was saying. So in my head, I was just going to write down having trouble finding the right guest and streamlining the process. Like I thought that's what I was going to go write down. So I walk in, and I was a corporate guy. Like I mentioned, aerospace. I did 15 years in that career, which I really loved. So a wall of whiteboards was very common for someone like me. And so I just write it up in the top corner. I paused for a second, and then the only way I can describe is a download from God. I felt like I just wrote. I mean, I filled up every inch of every whiteboard, and I was like, I stepped back, and I was like, whoa, where did this come from? And to simply describe it, what it boiled down to was like a dating app, but instead of connecting people for dates, it connects people for podcast interviews. And so wrote it all down. And I'm not a developer. So I was like, okay, this is an idea. I'm like, I would need a developer. I'm like, well, I know my friend Jesse. He and I were in each other's weddings. We went to church together for years. He's another guy I met in my early 20s. And I picked up the phone and texted him. I was like, hey, man, do you have time for like a quick call? I just want to pitch an idea to you. And almost immediately, he's like, yeah, sure. And I called him. I'm like, hey, man, like, let me just pitch this idea and tell me what you think. And he didn't even hesitate. He goes, yeah, I'm all in. Let's do it. He goes, I just wrapped up like a multi-year project 2 days ago. Let's do this. Like, let's draft up paperwork and become 50-50 partners. And we made it happen. And the rest was kind of history. But it came from that whole experience. And I do want to fast forward to one thing that happened 6 months later. I wish I would have known this on this day, but it was probably better for me not to know on this day. But it was me, my wife, Alicia, Jesse, and his wife, Jenna. The 4 of us went out to celebrate launching PodMatch. And she goes, yeah, you know what's wild, Alex? She goes, like 2 days before you called Jesse, someone at our church who I don't know walked up to me and said, your husband's going to get a phone call in 2 days about a business idea, and he's supposed to take the idea. And the person just walked away. And sure enough, 2 days later, I called, and that's why he didn't hesitate. He didn't care to share that information with me, which would have been like very reassuring, right? But it was one of those things. It's like, man, like I told him, like, I would have loved to have known this, but that is such great confirmation that we're on the right track. And I was given that information the day we launched the company, which was a really good day to find out as well. So anyway, yeah, that was the whole like whiteboard experience and kind of how the whole thing started.
Wow. And that was 5 years ago. And you've more than 100,000 interviews have now taken place after connections on PodMatch. Why are you so passionate about the podcasting industry?
Oh, man. Thank you for asking this. Again, just a gift of a question that people like. It's my favorite thing to talk about. So thank you. 100,000 interviews is an incredible thing. I try to avoid looking at numbers too much myself. Again, not really driven by that, more driven by impact. For me, if it helps one person today, then it's worthwhile. When I think of 100,000 interviews, I do think, hey, if each of those interviews impacted one person, that's still 100,000 people that are getting impacted by what we're doing here, right? And I'm just so thankful for that. And what I believe to be true about podcasting is that this medium, podcasting, there is, yes, the video element these days, but audio still this day is when people are taking a walk, when they're cooking, when they're cleaning, when they're doing something that's engaging a different muscle that allows them to really retain well while they're listening. And it's a very intimate medium. It's allowing them to get some information that they want. Some people want to hear stories. Some people want to laugh. Some people want to cry. if they're struggling with something. Some people just want to learn something new about a topic that they're curious about. But at the end of the day, I think that podcasting is the primary medium that's really serving people and driving them forward in today's world. So for me, the reason I'm so passionate about that and excited to see 100,000 plus interviews getting released is because I have to believe each of those is impacting somebody's life, and it's ultimately making the world a better place. And I'm a firm believer in that. And yes, as I mentioned multiple times now, I'm a follower of Jesus. It doesn't need to be like quote unquote Christian content to impact somebody's life, to help them. At the end of the day, people are searching maybe for an answer to one question, and your voice, your guest's voice might be the only voice that finally makes that thing click for somebody. To me, man, there's just nothing more powerful than that. And I am just, again, a firm believer in the impact that podcasting is having on the world today.
That's awesome. So when somebody is thinking about starting a podcast and they come to you or somebody gets a message to you that they're thinking about starting a podcast, what do you say to them?
I always want to say, Melvin, do it. But yeah, I don't always say that. Typically, listen, we shared the stat earlier. You're at 100 episodes. And again, congratulations. Not many people make it that far. And so I don't tell people automatically, yeah, launch a podcast, because I'm like, the statistics are totally against you. And so I don't discourage people, but I typically like to dive deeper into why. And earlier, you shared like a very beautiful purpose behind your show. And again, the parts that stuck out to me is like thought-provoking and generating laughter for people. Like, I love that. Like, you have a real reason for what you do, and you do that through storytelling in such an incredible way. If someone's like, I want to launch a podcast, I'm like, why? I don't know, it looks like fun. I typically will tell them, hey, like, you need to really like go home and do some soul searching. Like, why do you want to launch it? And like, oh, maybe it'll build me a big audience. And to me, I'm still like, maybe not the best choice, right? Like, and I don't try to be rude by saying any of those things. Just, I realize the amount of work that goes into it. But when someone comes up to me and says, Alex, I think I want to launch a podcast because I am really passionate about helping people understand how to raise children that will become high functioning adults. Like, even something like, I'm like, that's a great show. Yes, you should launch that show. And I don't necessarily, I'm not like a launch strategist or anything like that. So I will pass them along to people that I know and trust. But I tell people, if you've got a real purpose, a real why behind it, then do it, because that can make an impact. But if you're just like, looks fun, I'm going to do it. I'm like, maybe not. I don't know.
All right, let's talk about some of the nuts and bolts of podcasting. Why do you recommend that podcasters spend time, quote, doing things that don't scale?
Doing things that don't scale. To me, that this idea is staying connected with why you got started in the first place. I'll just take this to the unicorn level. So like, we're looking at $1 billion+ companies. Typically, when a company gets that big or gets that big really fast, they at least temporarily have this dip where things just look like they're going to crash and burn. It's not going to work anymore. And the reason it happens is that the person who recreated it started growing so fast that they could no longer communicate or have any connection to the person they created it for initially, removing that completely. So they're building to get to this evaluation versus doing it for a human being. Listen, humans don't like stuff for robots. Humans like stuff for humans, right? So that's why most of these companies, you see this dip, because they have to realign to, okay, we need to talk to the people that we're supposedly helping, because I don't think we're helping them anymore. And so listen, our podcasts are not unicorns. They're not having billions of people listening. But if we get too caught up in what microphone am I using? How long are my episodes? And like, how can I edit this better? And what can I do here? And that stuff is all important. But we do all that stuff to the extent that we no longer spend time with the people that we say are our ideal listener. We lose that connection. So doing things that don't scale, to me, is that one-on-one conversation. Get on a virtual video call with someone for 5 or 10 minutes. Exchange voice notes on social media. That stuff does not scale at all. Like, it doesn't. You can never talk to someone for 10 minutes and then make that take less time. If you're talking for 10 minutes, it's 10 minutes of your time, right? So that's just how it works. But the reality is, to me, that is the most beneficial thing you can do as a podcaster, because it actually helps you remember, this is who I'm serving. And I'm actually realizing I'm hearing a trend among the people that I say I serve. They're starting to ask this other question now. An example, storytelling. AI is a thing. Are people that are interested in storytelling asking like, hey, is AI going to impact this? Maybe that's a topic, but only if you're a listener saying that. We don't want to leave it to ourselves and be like, I bet they're wondering this. Let's not bet or guess. Let's actually do the thing that doesn't scale and have those one-on-one conversations. For me, it's how I grow my show as well. So not just talking for feedback, but also how I grow my show. I try to find one person every day. It just doesn't really scale, that I say, this is the ideal person who would love to listen to my show. I'm just gonna start a conversation with them, and eventually I'll mention my podcast if I get the chance to. Doesn't scale, but it's one of the most impactful ways I've learned to communicate and share my show really well. And again, make sure it's heading in the right direction.
I've heard you call that an avatar.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. And I've put some thought into that, and I discovered who the avatar is for my show. And it's a guy who also lives in Florida. And I know he listens to every episode because he reviews every episode. And I really appreciate that. And so when I'm thinking about each episode, I'm thinking, all right, would Clark find this topic interesting? Or is this something that wouldn't necessarily fit his age group? Or would this be more likely to be for a woman? And so the episode aren't specifically for him, but I've got him in mind when I'm putting it together because he's such a fan of the show. And I really appreciate that. And I want him to know. So I'm sure he's listening, Clark. I appreciate you. So I'm going to tell you that now so that everybody else can hear it too. So that's what I got. Another thing that I learned from you, Alex.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, my avatar's name is Adam. And same thing. I know Adam. And I learn more about Adam by having those one-on-one calls, by reaching out to people who I think might be interested. It helps me figure out who Adam, that avatar, that ideal listener who is fictitious, but it helps me really understand that. So thank you for doing that. I think that's how we connect our why and our purpose for getting into podcasting to something that's actually tangible. And listen, the why, when you're in the middle of editing, sometimes you're I don't really care why I'm doing this. This just isn't fun today, right? But if you're you know what, Clark needs me to show up today. Now you have a person. And I think a lot of us don't want to let someone down that's relying on us. It helps keep you motivated when the going gets tough.
Absolutely. All right. So I'm going to tee this question up for you. How can podcasters find and book ideal guests for their show?
PodMatch.com that we've talked about here a bit, like a dating app, but instead of connecting for dates, connects for podcast interviews. That's exactly what the platform was created for, to connect guests and hosts for interviews, and to, I like to say, streamline and automate as many things as possible in between that process, because just saying, yep, you're a good guest, yep, I'd like to be on your show, there's a lot of work that goes on between that. And the goal was just, can we make it so that people don't even have to exchange an email? They can just both have everything they need, have it set up and ready to go. And I can't say we've perfected that part of it, but we're getting closer every single week. We release an update every week that's improving that process along the way. But to answer your question, podmatch.com, thank you for the opportunity to even talk about my platform. That means a ton, Melvin. Thank you.
Yeah. And when people are either thinking about going into podcasting or new to it, one of the things I think they overlook is the production side of it. It's a lot of work. If you want to do it right, it's a lot of work. So what suggestions or what advice do you have for new podcasters on the production side of things?
Yeah, the production side. This is what almost got me to stop podcasting when I got into it, was the production side of it. The first thing I'll say about this is, do not compare your day one to someone else's year 20. I mentioned Jordan Harbinger earlier. If you go listen to his podcast, look at the brand around it, don't think that you have to have that when you're getting started. He started as a hobbyist, and I've had conversations with him. I've even interviewed him on this topic where he's like, the best way to start is just have fun with it. It's not going to be great when it starts, but it'll get there, right? Yes, have some pride in what you do. Have a spirit of excellence, do your best, but don't seek being perfect or saying, I want to be just like this individual. Be yourself and do the best you can. For me, I started saying, I need to do all these other things because that's what the big podcasters do. When in reality, the only thing required of being a podcaster is consistently releasing value-adding episodes for listeners to consume. That's the only thing that's required. So focus more on the quality of the content, the words being said, than anything else. So when you're starting, start with the bare minimum. Where do you, that's the foundation that we just shared now. Where do you build from there? Do some basic editing, add an intro and outro to it. If a dog starts barking in the background and neither of you are talking, remove that part, right? If Alex sneezes while we're having the conversation, try to edit that out, please, right? These things are some basics that you can do. And I always tell people, don't go so much that you're just I'm just going to release it how it is. That can be good, but if, I know I'm not the best speaker or podcast guest in the world, and Melvin will have to edit some of the things I've said. It's better that way. It helps elevate me, it helps elevate him, and ultimately makes it a better experience for Clark. the ideal avatar, the listener, right? And so I always tell people, like, don't overwhelm yourself with the production because there's so many things that you can do. Keep the main thing the main thing. If the goal is to release value-adding episodes on a consistent basis for listeners to consume, then focus on the things that directly impact that. You can go after new listeners later, but start with some good basic editing. And there are, Melvin, I'm not sure exactly what tools you used when you first got started, but the tools have evolved rapidly and will continue to do so. It's getting easier and easier. Still not easy, but easier and easier to be able to actually do this really well.
Yeah, with the AI integration I use Riverside, by the way, for most of my work. But the AI integration makes it so much easier. I write. I've been a writer my whole life. So the writing part is easy for me, but it's not as easy as pushing a button, having AI do it.
Right.
It's something that might take me 10 minutes will take AI 10 seconds. And it may not be what I want, but it gives me a start. And then I can go and edit it and then make it personal and make it from me, not just from a computer generation. So all of those tools make this a little bit easier, but I still don't want to give up that personal touch.
Yeah, the personal touch, I think, that's what gives it a personality, right? Because there are certain tools now that will like generate an entire AI podcast, no human involvement at all. To my knowledge, there's not a single one of those that's popular at all. Even though the voices sound really human, they can even interact. The people that listen to it are curious about the technology, but people always say it's missing something. I'm like, yeah, it's missing the human soul. That's what we all connect with. Humans, I shared it earlier, but humans like interacting with humans, not with robots, right? We want robots to serve us, yes, but people don't enjoy that content because it's missing something, even though it's perfectly mimicking what humans are. It's still a mimic of what's actual, right? And so the personality of your show is huge. And I think that leaving some of your weirdness, right? I'm speaking to everyone here, not you, Melvin, in general, but leaving
I got plenty of weirdness for everybody.
Good to know. But you leave a little bit of that character in there. That's what people really connect with. They like that part of it, right? And so I think that for all of us, we need to say, yeah, I'm using these tools. It's helping, but put your personality into it because that's what adds the dimension that tells someone else, Melvin's a person. I like Melvin because of this. And so I always encourage people, keep that involved in it. Don't let AI do everything for you. You got to have some of your own interaction in there as well.
Absolutely. So I only have a couple more questions as we start to wind down the conversation. This is sort of a broader question, then I'm going to narrow it for the second one. Where does the podcasting industry go from here?
Yeah, we just mentioned AI. AI is definitely reshaping online, period, right? Like everything online is being reshaped by it. But what I am finding is there's a lot of people that get nervous about it. And I don't think that we should. It's like a affordable research assistant. My dream when I was in corporate, like I did really well, but I always wanted to have a full-time employee. Their only job was to go figure things out for me that I was just curious about. It had nothing to do with the job. I could never pitch that to the board. They were not interested in that for obvious reasons. I have that now. I have research. You can use it for that. It's great. It's an extension of who we are. It's also making tools way better to serve people. The problem I see happening, though, is that people are relying too heavily on it and wanting it to be them instead. And I already kind of shared this, but instead of them be it. And I'm seeing in the podcasting industry, that is one of the things that I think could potentially hinder its future growth because people that are listening are going to look for human stuff. And if there's not as much human stuff, that's tough, right? Like now they're like, oh man, it's all robots. There's no people doing this anymore. But on the flip side, people that are willing to put in the work, that are willing to do the writing, that are willing to talk, they're getting elevated more than ever. And one very practical way I've seen this is I write about podcasting stuff. And people have been asking me like, Alex, how come everything you write hits the top of Google almost instantly? I'm like, well, show me your article. Their article is 100% AI generated. Mine is 100% handwritten. That's just the way that's been my strategy. And I'm like, well, they're like, well, yours took 4 hours to make. Mine only took like 5 minutes. I'm like, yes. And the internet knows that. And so it's going to favor the person that put in the work, right? And so for me, it's getting easier to get exposure. It's getting easier for me to get good reviews. People are like, oh, a human, look, a human, let's go to that. That's what we gravitate toward. So I think that the future of podcasting will be under attack quite a bit by AI, but people that are willing to do the work are going to stand out even more. And we're continuing to see from a listenership standpoint, people are flocking to podcast for some reasons we already expressed. So I think it's a very good future for podcasting.
Okay, so let's make this personal for the last question of the day. What's next for Alex Sanfilippo?
next up for me is just to continue honing in what we're doing with PodMatch. So like I said, that slot between finding a guest, finding a host, making that initial connection, really making what happens in between that process really good for people. Again, using AI, we've been able to really enhance the tool a lot. We will continue to do that because we want to make it as frictionless as possible. What's next for Alex is making it so that podcast guests and hosts can spend more time doing what they like, which is what we're doing now, time behind the microphone together, and less time doing everything else that makes this work. If we can find a way to delegate that so that, again, we can enhance this, man, that's the future I want to be part of. And that's really where I'm heading. Like everything I do is focused on ensuring there's more time behind the microphone together.
All right. That's a great way to wind up this episode. I want to sort of give a shout out to PodMatch again. So whether you're a podcast guest or host or aspiring guest or host, podmatch.com/free will give you some quick ideas to help you grow and improve in your podcasting efforts. So podcasting guru Alex Sanfilippo has been our special guest for my 100th episode. Alex, it's been an honor to have you here today.
Melvin, thank you again. Seriously, a gift to be here with you.
Thanks. So check out my website at podcastreallife.com. If you go there, you can find the links to every platform that carries this show. You can also find links to Alex's show and to PodMatch. That's it for today's episode of Stories from Real Life. Join us again next time for another chance to learn from each other. Until then, don't forget to shine your light wherever you go.
That was Stories from Real Life. Join us again next week for another great storytelling journey. See you next time.